Hello, welcome to Savannah Knits. This is my knitting podcast where I talk all about the things that I'm knitting that are bringing me joy. My name is Savannah and I live in Utah in the United States, where I am a stay-at-home mom and I love to knit and read in my spare time. And I like to ask you guys a question of the day so I can get to know you better. So the question is, when do you start knitting spring and summer garments, or crocheting, or making whatever you do? I've been thinking about this because I've been seeing some people's spring knitting plans and some other people that are ahead of the game and getting their spring and summer knitting projects going so that they can be ready. I am personally not ready for that quite yet, but it made me curious when you start thinking about it, when you start casting things on. So let me know in the comments below and I would love to hear. Before we move on, I would love to tell you what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing the Courage Henley by Tori Yu. It's a worsted weight Henley saddle shoulder sweater, and I made mine in Cascade 220 in Doeskin Heather. Definitely one of my most worn sweaters. It also needs a little bit of a de-pill, so forgive the pills if you see them. I love Cascade 220 so much, but it does need to be de-pilled about every 4 wears for me personally. But I love this cozy sweater, and it's rainy today and cold, and this is just my go-to cozy throw it on sweater. So today is going to be a chill episode. I just have whips to catch you up on. I have been knitting, I would say, quite a bit, and I don't know if it's truly reflective of if you can see that progress, because I don't have any finished objects and my projects are just slow going right now because they're mostly color work. So I thought I would still update you because I have gotten things done, have a bit of progress and things that I've learned the past 10 days or so. So let's get into it. The first work in progress is the Iris by Trin Onley, and I'm making the size 2. It uses Holstgarn Super Soft, which is a fingering weight yarn that blooms a lot when blocking, but it feels definitely ropey and rough when you're knitting with it because it has all of the spinning oil in it. But I did make a hat as my swatch, and I know that it blooms a lot, and I really like the fabric once it is blocked. So I'm using the same yarn as the pattern suggests, the same colors as the sample, and I'm using the same needle size for the color work, which is a 3.5mm needle. And I have been using a 2.75mm for the ribbing. However, she recommends a 3mm, but I wanted my ribbing to be a bit tighter, so I'm doing 2.75. Let me show you what I have so far. Also, if you want to know the color names for these yarns, check out my Ravelry project page. My Ravelry is linked down below, and you can find all of the color names on there. Or check the pattern and see what yarn she used, because I'm using the exact same yarn, exact same colors. So this is what we have so far. Let's see, the sleeve is a little bit folded in here, or the armhole. It's looking very, very good. It's beautiful. I can't wait for this to be done. So I have a marker of where I was last time. There's the marker right there. So I have done quite a bit of progress. And just for funsies, let's see how many inches I've done. 6 inches of work, which is quite impressive if I do say so myself. It is fingering weight, it is coloring, so I will take it. 6 inches is fantastic. Now, I didn't only do 6 inches of knitting on this. I also steeked the armholes. And I mentioned last time that that was my plan, that I was going to steek these as soon as I had done maybe an inch under the armhole. And it was a bit of a nightmare at first. I first had to steek on the neckline, and I talked a lot about that in my last podcast episode if you're interested. So I knew that the crochet reinforcement worked for me. It worked well. I had no issues. With this armhole, I did the same thing, and that ended up being a mistake. So I did the crochet reinforcement. I can link the tutorial that I used down below, and I decided to use a superwash merino nylon sock yarn to do the reinforcement right here, which I'm really glad that I did that because it is very strong, and that ended up really helping me later on. So I did the crochet reinforcement, and when I did the neckline, I did it as tight as I could. I saw another project for this iris saying that they did their crochet reinforcement as tight as possible, and I thought that would be a good idea, and because it wouldn't unravel. Now this is my first time steeking in this garment, so there's going to be learning curves. When I did the steek very, very tightly, was it on this arm or the other one? I think it was on this armhole. Yeah. When you do the steek very, very tightly, I didn't realize that it was going to pull and gather the stitches. So I did this armhole. This armhole depth is supposed to be 8 inches, which is on her schematic, and is an armhole depth that many of my sweaters have for my size. And when I did this steek, I cut it, and then I tried on just that sleeve to make sure that it wasn't going to unravel, make sure that it looks good. And it was so tight on my arm, and I measured it, and it was 7 inches. Before I did the steeking, the armhole measured the 8 inches. So I was so confused if I had just measured wrong, but then I measured the other armhole that I hadn't steeked yet, and it was still 8 inches. So I knew that it was 8 inches before the steek, but then after the steek, it somehow was 7 inches. And so it was a very stressful and sad maybe 16 hours after that, because I was wondering how I could fix this. Was I going to like frog back on the body and then add more steek stitches here and then cut more? Was I just going to leave it? Should I just cut into the faux seam right here without adding the extra steek stitches? But how would that influence the fit? And this is just unknown territory for me. I was so stressed because this is a lot of work. It's fingering weight and it's color work, and I was devastated. But I was knitting on something else, and I swear I do my best thinking while I'm knitting. Sometimes I just like to sit in silence and knit, and I swear I come up with my best ideas when I'm doing that. So as I was knitting something else, I was thinking through why it would get tighter. And then I realized, well, you did your crochet reinforcement really tight, so I bet that made a difference. And then someone else on Instagram, I asked for advice on Instagram about this because I had no idea what I was doing, and someone else mentioned that my crochet stitches might be too tight. And so I was wondering how I could fix that. I didn't really want to like pull it out and then redo it while I had already cut the stitches. I feel like I would have been so scared that it would have unraveled, and it honestly probably would have. I'm not sure. As I said, newbie. So I ended up getting a tapestry needle, and luckily I had long tail ends of the sock yarn here. They were a lot longer than this. I am so thankful that I have long tail ends because I ended up using that slack to then go through on every single stitch with the tapestry needle and pull the stitch and just loosen them. And I did that to every single stitch on these armhole steeks. So they definitely do look wonky. It doesn't look even anymore. You see all those wonky stitches right there. But I did that to every single stitch and just used the tail ends for the slack and just pulled. And that's why I was very glad that I did the sock yarn with nylon in it, because I could pull that very hard. And because it was so tight, I did have to pull it really hard with the needle, but the yarn was so strong. And I feel like if I did any other yarn, it would not have worked. So I'm so thankful I did that. So I pulled each stitch with the tapestry needle, made sure that they were bigger, measured it again, and it was 8 inches. Hallelujah. So then I went to the other armhole and I made sure that I did a not loose, but a looser crochet reinforcement. I still used a 2.25 millimeter crochet hook, just because I wanted it to not be too loose so that the stitches wouldn't become unraveled. But I think I hit a good balance on this side of not being too tight. And these stitches probably even look small, but let me tell you, they were a lot smaller on the other side. So I learned a very valuable lesson in that your crochet steeks the reinforcements need to not be super tight. They need to somewhat match the row gauge of your sweater so that you're not pulling it in weird places, making it smaller. So there's definitely a happy medium with that, and I learned my lesson, and I am so grateful that I could fix it without having to frog anything, without having to cut more. I was very, very grateful that there was a solution to that. It also turned me off a little bit of steeking. I was so stressed for those however many hours from making that mistake to then figuring it out. And I was talking to Emily from Emily Knits about this too, is knitting is our hobby, and sometimes the stress is not worth it. Like, we both just don't love the idea of steeking, and I don't want that kind of stress in my hobby. My hobbies are not supposed to be stressful. They're supposed to bring me joy and peace in my already stressful life. So I think it's going to be a long time before I steek again, just because it was such a stressful process. And I have full confidence that I could do it again and that I've learned. So it's not really a confidence thing. It's just my hobby needs to bring me joy, and steeking does not bring me joy. I would rather knit colorwork flat any day. I'm also a Norwegian purler, so knitting colorwork flat is the same for me. Very, very similar for me as just knitting colorwork in the round. So it's not that big of a deal. So those are my thoughts on steeking. I will be surprised if I do another steeked garment anytime soon, but never say never. I know I will eventually, but it's gonna have to be long enough that I can forget about this nightmare. So with this body portion of the iris, I am making the same size as the designer in her sample, which is a size 2. I think it's around 51 inches, so that will give me about 10 inches of positive ease, but I measured my gauge and I'm pretty tight. And I know when blocking, this shrinks a lot with row gauge. So I'm keeping that in mind. I am also happy with the fit where it's at right now. I didn't really want that 10 inches. Was it 10? Yeah, 10 inches of positive ease. I feel like that's a lot for me, but there's a big jump between sizes because the sweater is supposed to have a lot of positive ease. But I knew if I picked the 51 inches and my row gauge, or my stitch gauge and row gauge is a little tighter, it would work out great. It would be right around in that 47-inch spot where I really like to have my sweaters, and I'm normally a tight knitter, especially when it comes to colorwork. So I knew that that would work out well. Oh, I'm losing stitches. But I have been warned that it does shrink quite a bit, which I didn't super see on my hat that I made for my swatch. But obviously that's a shorter accessory, not a whole sweater. So I'm definitely going to be knitting this longer than my preferred, which is super fantastic when it's fingering weight colorwork. I just have to knit way longer because it's going to shrink. Yippee for me. I am enjoying the process though. I will say that. It's a lot of knitting and it takes a lot of time, but I love the yarn colors. I love the process of knitting color work. I feel like I've gotten a groove down. So anyways, in her sample photo, she has this flower motif repeated 4 times. So I'm on number 3. I'm almost done with the 3rd time. So I just have to do that one more time, and then I think I'm going to do an extra brown portion right here at the very end, and then do the ribbing. Of course, I'll try it on, see how it goes. I think I even have a sweater that is a little bit too long for me. It's fine, but it does feel a little bit too long, so I might measure the length of that one and just knit this sweater to that length, knowing that it will shrink a little bit and then be perfect. So definitely have that in mind. I also mentioned last week that I wasn't sure if this collar would be too wide. A lot of the sample photos of this sweater and other people's Ravelry projects have the wider neckline, and I didn't like that. But I think it's because I did that neckline steek so tight, because that was before I realized that I was doing my crochet reinforcement too tight. I think that worked in my favor for the collar because I feel like it fits perfectly now. So that's good. And I'm really hoping that by the next podcast episode, I could have the body done, or at least the color work of the body done. I feel like that's a reasonable goal if things keep going how they are. I have been more in a reading mood though, so that might hinder me a little bit. But I'll just keep working, keep plugging along. I'm trying to enjoy the process with this one because this is very much a process knit, not a product knit because of how long it's taking, but it's very enjoyable. I have the color work chart. I wouldn't say memorized. I do have to reference it, but it's easy for me to knit now because I've repeated this motif so many times that as soon as I get to a new row, I remember it. And I remember the counts for the different colors and everything. So it's becoming more familiar to me. I also have been split splicing my color changes, so I won't have a lot of ends to weave in, which I'm definitely going to be doing that in the future because that's very, very handy. So I think that's all that I have updates for the iris. I started it on February 3rd. So I've been working on it for 1 month and 3 days. Can you guys tell that it got a lot darker? And if you hear some ambient rain noises in the background, those are actual rain noises. So maybe that'll add some coziness to your podcast watching for today. I am personally loving this rainy weather. I love rain so much. And in Utah, we get a good amount, but I would love to live somewhere where we get rain all the time. Anyways, let's move on to the next whip. I am making the Woolly Giants cowl by Mary P. Hunt. I'm using Juniper Moon Farm Patagonia Organic Merino, longest title ever, in mahogany and pearl. And this is what we have so far. Look at that beautiful mammoth and the little tusks and the trees. It's looking so cool. I absolutely love it. It's very fun to work on. I would say that this though is harder to work on than the iris now because the iris just has a motif of a lot less stitches, and this one is, the motif is so long. It's, this whole thing is one line in the color work chart. So it does take me more time to do it, more attention. As I've said before, this is going to be a decor piece, not used as a cowl. I'm going to frame it and put it in my living room. I have the progress marker to show you how much progress I did this week. It's a little honeybee that I can't turn around. I probably put it on backwards. Yep, and then I've done all that. That's 2.5 inches, so I did do more in between episodes than I have ever before, and I think it's because I finished those socks of the last podcast episode, so I was able to work on this more. Yeah, I don't know what else to update you on, except I'm just still working on it. and it's looking fantastic. And I am honestly almost done. I only have a quarter of it left. So will a miracle happen and I'll finish it by the next episode? I have said that every single episode in the past month. Will I finish it by the next episode? No, Savannah, you will not. But hope. So we'll see how far I get. I started this on December 27th. So it's been on my needles for 2 months and a week. And it's time to get this off. But we'll see where I get. Because this is shaping up to be a shorter episode today, I thought I would update you on my long-term WIP, which is the Sweet Shop Blanket by Laura Penrose. I would normally not update you. I feel like in the future I'm only going to update you once in a while because I'm just going to be slowly adding to it, but it's a shorter episode. I have done a bit more. So this is a garter stitch blanket that's kind of add as you go. And I am going to be using only variegated yarn for this to make it more cohesive. And for the main color, I am using Drops Fiesta, which is a new DK weight sock yarn from Garn Studio. The Drops, and this is the color Off-White, which is more of a yellowy off-white. And I have done 2.5 squares. So this was a variegated yarn from Capella Luna Fibers. Sorry, we've got an end in the way here. This is one, I think it was Manos del Uruguay Marla, I think. And then this is a Ruby and Roses Gumdrops yarn. So it's very, very fun, and when you're working on a square, it is a little bit addictive, and I love how squishy it is turning out to be. So enjoying my process very much with that. I did end up finding some metal needles that were 4mm, some straight 4mm needles. I think my mom found them, and I don't know if she got them like from a thrift store or somewhere, but I'm very happy to be working on metal needles instead of wooden, because the wooden was not fun and they were squeaking and it was driving me crazy. So yeah, now I have metal needles. I have been working on this for 2 weeks now, so we'll just slowly keep adding to it. This rain is getting a little crazy, so it's a good thing that it's a shorter podcast episode today. I want to thank you so much for watching, for spending your time with me, for being somewhat interested in my WIP updates. It means a lot to me. And don't forget to comment below on when you start thinking about your spring and summer makes. I would love to hear. And other than that, I hope you're finding joy in what you're making, and I'll see you next time. Bye.